Welcome into the Big Little Podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Patrick Previty. That is Andrew Greig. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel. First things first, we're going to be talking today about the Brian Kelly firing at LSU. Should they have made this move?
Yeah, so out of the three major coaching fires this season, I feel like this one's the most surprising. He has a very large buyout, which is consistent with like almost every head coach at major schools at this point. But just given his record at LSU, he's definitely lost some games that you'd maybe expect some wins out of. Like this year, probably the Vanderbilt loss was the most shocking, but Vanderbilt is a good school this year, or good at football this year. And just in general, they've had two 10-win seasons, including in his first year where he made the SEC championship and lost to Georgia by like a whopping like 20 points. It wasn't very close, but still made the SEC championship his first year, has had multiple 10-win seasons, has 3 bowl wins in his 3 complete full years there as head coach. And just in general, I think that there's definitely a case to be made for Brian Kelly just like garnering not the greatest culture in the world, and that LSU team this year maybe not being where it was supposed to be, coming into the season as top 10 team, and then beating the number 4 at that point ranked Clemson, and just having such high expectations. But I think it is a little bit surprising, and at this point, I don't think it's the right move. I think you maybe reevaluate at the end of the season where you want to go from here, but just completely like canceling his culture in the middle of the season is a very interesting move by LSU.
Well, I would say after the Texas A&M loss, I was maybe not expecting him to get fired on Sunday, but I'm not shocked that he did. I think when we look at some of these coach firings that we've seen so far, there's a little bit of a two kind of, you're reaching an impasse in perspective almost. You have to recognize what the program thinks of itself and their goals. And then also, too, like we're on the outside and what we as college football fans and people who cover the sport, what exactly is our viewpoint on the program. I think LSU, in my opinion, has had some amazing coaches, and they've had 2019, which was potentially the greatest college football team of all time. And that's where their 3 championships of the last 20 plus years have come from. So it's like, while they maybe potentially say that they are competing for national championships, is this a job or a program that actually deserves to have those type of expectations, and can they throw that on any sort of coach? I think that that's something to recognize here, and in my honest opinion, I do think that those expectations were a little high for Brian Kelly, and I do see what you're saying about kind of the way that he won a lot of games in his first year, made the SEC championship game, had multiple 9-win seasons. Like, he wasn't bad, but from their perspective, they think that they need more and that they should be better. And while I don't agree with that, I think that that's something that we have to recognize when we talk about a move like this.
Yeah, I think that setting up for the future is also something that they're doing here, and I think that with the current head coaching candidates, there's a name that particularly sticks out in Lane Kiffin, and maybe if you want to throw Nick Saban in the mix there as well. But I think that if you don't get Lane Kiffin or Nick Saban, I think Nick Saban a lot less likely. But if you don't get Lane Kiffin, this move, depending on who they do end up getting, could look a little bit worse than it does right now, just because if you're going from Brian Kelly, who is like essentially a proven winner, even though it's not exactly where you'd like it in the last couple of years. Last year, like they won 9 games, but it was including a bowl win against Baylor, and they actually only won 8 games in the regular season. And then this year, another kind of disappointing season. I could see where the thought process is at after 2 disappointing seasons, but I just don't think it was enough to get rid of him. And if you're going to, you would want to have a safety net and somebody that you think can really take over the program and get it to where it needs to be, like you were saying. At this point, LSU thinks of themselves as a school that should be consistently competing for national championships and at the top of the SEC. And you need the guy that's going to get you there. And Brian Kelly coming over from Notre Dame to LSU, he thought he'd be able to be the guy that would get them there. He's obviously not at this point, but can they find somebody else that is going to be that person, or it's definitely going to be a yet to see scenario? Because at the very least, Brian Kelly could recruit, and he didn't lose games that he wasn't really supposed to lose, in my opinion. Like I think that, like for the most part, the games that he did lose, maybe barring a couple, were kind of maybe not penciled in, especially for an LSU program that could be at the top of the SEC and top of the nation at the very best. But a lot of the games that he lost were games that you don't really fault him for. Maybe minus the Texas A&M, the way they got beaten in the Texas A&M game, it's a little drastic, especially at home. But I don't know. I don't think that he's committed like fireable offenses, where I'm really trying to get at with that point.
Okay, so here's where I diverge a little bit from you. I wanted to kind of mention just the different perspectives that everybody within or outside of the program has about themselves, and then I think that there also needs to be a secondary conversation of maybe if even if the expectations were too high, I don't think he even hit the ones that were where they should have been. Like he didn't even hit the lower expectations, to maybe say that in a better way. Um, I don't think that you're losing very much by firing Brian Kelly as far as culture is concerned. He could recruit, and I got to be honest, I don't know how he was keeping it up. It must have been the money, and that's a pretty good talking point. And it must have been the program and the uniform. Those two things stay. But and whoever you bring in is going to probably recruit pretty decently. I just saw so many different stories of former players, and there's been too many red flags about Brian Kelly as a coach and the way that he runs programs for me to really just sit back and say like that I even really care who they bring in next as far as like they need a safety net. Like obviously like Lane Kiffin's the big fish as far as if you're an SEC team hiring. Like if you're Florida and LSU, like you want to get him. But I think anybody who is brought in who's got a decent resume to them is probably going to present to you a better culture than Brian Kelly had because it just didn't feel authentic. There were too many stories about former players feeling like they got shunned. And then obviously there are the big stories about the different stuff that he's done to former players and maybe other people within or around programs. There's obviously a ton of that. And I just and honestly feel like that needs to be addressed as far as when you talk about Brian Kelly. I don't know. I don't really, I'm not going to buy too much into the culture. And I think if you're asking, what have you done for me on the field? And you say if it's not enough and you look about, him as running your program, you're definitely not going to find a good answer there either. He gets an F on the report card for the culture, and if it's any lower than a C, then as far as the on the field production, I think that's probably warrants a firing.
Yeah, I can kind of get behind that too because everything that you're saying about the culture that he's building at any like at any, either his previous stops or right now at LSU is probably not like what you'd want. I think that the assessment of the culture is probably pretty accurate. So then you have to look to the football field, like you're saying, and at this point, it makes sense, but it is just it is a very drastic culture we kind of live in with the coaches at this point, where you're not safe at any point in the season, even if you have a $50+ million buyout or whatever, you have to be performing each and every week, and I think that it is a little bit unfortunate from his point of view. Like I hate to be defending him this much, but like also just the team that he's like kind of assembled just hasn't been up to snuff, which is like partially on him. I think that he definitely deserves a bit of blame for that. But like Garrett Nussmeier was supposed to be a top 10 overall pick this year, and he's playing like he shouldn't have even gotten drafted. So does that go into it? Probably, yeah, like definitely yes. Especially after the end of last season, they kind of crashed in the middle, but then they ended up winning their last three games, and there was maybe an uptick, and just the Garrett Nussmeier hype train was rolling. He played pretty well at the end of last season. So just for him to come out like a little bit like just off this year, and then just for that ball to keep on rolling, it is a little bit unfortunate just from Brian Kelly's perspective, because he's just expecting more from this team in general. That defense was supposed to be one of the top units in all of college football, and they're letting him 49 points in his last game as head coach. So just in terms of what he was, the hand that he was dealt this year, I think he might have gotten a little bit of a raw deal, even though it is his job to put the the team together. I don't think that this team was exactly like playing the hardest for him, which is on him, and I guess that is also another reason he could be fired. So maybe talking myself out of defending him as I'm doing it.
But like I said, and what we started the first half of this video on was honestly just talking about expectations and the fact that he's got some great wins under his belt as far as being the LSU head coach. Did you say 33-10 as his record as the head coach? Like
Yeah, we
that's
never addressed that, but it was 34-14. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, so like that's fine. I mean, it's nothing bad. I mean, he's in the middle of his fourth year, but I think it just comes down to the SEC is so wide open this year, and this team did come in with a lot of expectations. Who are you going to blame? I don't know if they're ready to, point blame at anybody like Garrett Nussmeier or any of the other players, even though that's a big deal. But you had a great offense last year, not so good defense, and then this year you have a putrid offense and a great defense. At a certain point, you got to look at, hey, can Brian Kelly fix this at some point? And then with the culture not being there, I think you're more likely to blame him and maybe get some of the confirmation bias. I think another thing here too is the Notre Dame aspect of it all. I think it really showed a lot whenever their culture felt like it sped all the way up to where it maybe should be in 2025. Oh, they're likable now. Oh, shoot, they rallied and they went to the national championship game. This year, they're certainly on their way to 10-2, it looks like, and maybe another playoff appearance. Like, when you are an LSU booster and you're looking at, oh man, we got Brian Kelly faking a Southern accent, doing all these different things. He's recruiting, but I don't know how long this is going to last. And also, the players that he's recruiting aren't good. And then the team that he left and said he couldn't win a national championship with, essentially, is competing for national championships beyond you. You look at that and you're like, oh, like shoot, well, maybe, you know what, we'll just cut ties here. I also think too, the way that they look at themselves on the national stage is, you're one coach away from having your program be into like enter a hellhole for 10 years that you can't get out of, or you're going to need a truly generational type of coach to get you out of. And I think that they were ready to cut that, because the next guy that they hire will have a lot less tough or a lot less difficult of a job to be able to bring this team back.
Yeah, I think that the final important stat here is probably 19-10 in conference play. I think that record is probably one of the best ever that Scott and fired. At least that, like, win percentage wise, maybe not the volume of games, because he's only coached for 3.5 seasons. But I think that's something that's interesting to look at, just because you only you win 60% of your SEC games. Most of them are going to be against top 25 opponents. You think that you might have a chance of at least making it through the season is just my kind of overall assessment of this, because I think that kind of the position I've maintained through like some of these big coaching firings this season is just that like letting a coach finish out a season sometimes isn't the worst thing in the world, and like maybe being a little bit trigger happy. And with a record like that, it definitely, I don't know. I just don't think firing him right now is going to fix anything. But I mean, maybe just getting him out the door as quickly as possible was what they were envisioning. And losing by 24 points at home against Texas A&M definitely is a bad look at the very least.